Hi, welcome to 5 Minute Videos for the review for the NCE. This is intake assessment and diagnosis, and we are under subcategory U, evaluating counseling effectiveness. Now, this is a growing topic, both in counseling as well as in the education field. There's been a growing emphasis on objective measures of quantifying um, the outcomes for counselors, and usually when people say evaluating the counseling process or client outcomes, you may hear what they're referring to is using assessments, performance assessments, in order to look at the changes that have occurred throughout the counseling process. There's different measures, there's different ways of looking at that. Usually you have to keep reliability and validity data in order to assess some of the psychometric measures for those assessments. Um, and usually there's also things like video recordings, and then there's ways of looking at qualitative data, which is things that you can't necessarily measure through like a self-reported inventory or things like that. So in counseling, just in general, this has been kind of a growing trend because people are asking, how can we prove that counseling is effective, and that there is positive changes that occur when a client is put in a vulnerable position, and when they are going through the therapeutic process with a trained clinician. As always, this field, research is needed, and there's always more research to be determined, because again, we're not we're complex organisms, and because of the complexity, no two individuals are going to respond in the same way, and therefore, it's really difficult, if not impossible, I would say, to come up with a universal method of determining effectiveness, just in general, because no one data point is going to be universal for everyone. So that is something to keep in mind. But again, this is a hot topic in the field, and it is creating a lot of different ways of evaluating, as well as looking at different data points in order to see kind of how best to measure, or how to even go about looking at ways of measuring effectiveness, and kind of that notion of rethinking what is acceptable evidence. Is it acceptable evidence if the client just says, oh yeah, I feel better? Or do you need a standardized unit of measure in order to evaluate, how effective, and also looking at short versus long term, right? If the client just finished their, let's say they just finished their 12th session, and they're self-reporting that they're doing so much better, and they met their goals, well, is that going to be, are they going to say something similar 6, 12, 24 months down into the future? So how sustainable are these types of outcomes, and how should we measure it. So just some of the things that have been used as types of evidence. Checklists, those are usually a type of formative assessment. Something called a lifeline, looking at kind of the timelines and kind of how different things trickle down through the therapeutic process. Another measure that has multiple data points or portfolios, looking at different works, different samples, and then how those holistic samples have kind of changed through the therapeutic process. And then you may hear the cognitive mappings or different techniques. You may also see observational forms, usually that pre and post test, and then self monitoring data. So things like how are you sleeping? Do you have maybe a watch or something that can kind of track um, those things over time. So those are just some of the things that are out in the field. But again, this is a ever growing, changing dynamic.